As planned in Operation Overlord's American landings on the Cotentin Peninsula, 2 U.S. Army Airborne divisions, the 82nd and 101st, were to drop behind the assault sector of Utah Beach before dawn on D-Day and support the landings of the American 4th Infantry Division on the beach. The tasks and objectives allocated to the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were subdivided into various missions. The overall objective for the airborne forces on D-Day were to secure key bridges, roads, towns, and strategic choke points that could prevent possible German counterattacks on Utah Beach. Have you ever thought about what it was like to take part in operations such as D-Day? Well, you can take part in similar battles by playing our sponsor, War Thunder. It's by far the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, where you can play with more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships in dynamic, combined arms PvP battles. The collection of vehicles in War Thunder span over 100 years of development, from the 1920s to the present day. The vehicles are incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components, offering a highly immersive combat experience. You can play fast action-packed matches or more realistic and tactical battles, whichever you prefer, as War Thunder offers intense PvP battles at various immersion levels for all playstyles. In my games, I especially like the vehicle damage models and the immersive graphics, such as the fire and smoke effects. Play War Thunder on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox using my link below. When registering on PC, there is a large free bonus pack for using my link, including multiple premium vehicles, premium account, boosters, and much more. See you on the battlefield in War Thunder. Major General Maxwell D. Taylor's 101st Airborne Division, a well-trained division that would see its first action, was to jump into Normandy on the night of D-Day alongside the veterans of the 82nd. Parachuting into Normandy to the west and southwest of Utah Beach at drop zones A, C, and D, it was the 101st Airborne's objectives for Mission Albany to ensure that the Utah Beach landings by the 4th Infantry went smoothly and without heavy resistance or possible counterattacks by the Germans from inland. The flooded fields along the Douve River and the farmland behind Utah Beach created a series of elevated, narrow causeway roads. It would be the 101st job to secure the 4 causeway exits off Utah, which would be the only avenue for the 4th Infantry to get off the beach. The causeways were designated numbers 1 through 4 and divided amongst the 502nd and 506th Parachute Infantry Regiments. Colonel George Van Horn Mosley Jr.'s 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, along with the attached guns of the 377th Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, would jump over Drop Zone A, just to the west of the northern beach exits, causeways 3 and 4. Each of the 3 parachute battalions of the 502nd had a separate mission that had to be met by the time of the beach landings at 0630 hours. The 1st Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel Patrick F. Cassidy was to secure 2 objectives. One objective was to secure a series of houses west of Utah Beach and eliminate a garrison of troops from a German artillery battery along the coast. This objective was designated as the WXYZ Complex. Planners feared that the garrison of the WXYZ Complex, which had an unknown number of troops, would be able to effectively mount a counterattack against the beach landing forces if given time to prepare. That is why the WXYZ Complex was so crucial to the operation's success. The second objective for Cassidy's 1st Battalion was the small village of Foucaultville, located just north of Utah Beach. Foucaultville was the northernmost village of the entire landing area for the invasion and had to be captured in order to prevent a German counterattack coming from the north, from Cherbourg. Meanwhile, the 2nd Battalion of the 502nd under Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Chapuis would secure a German coastal artillery battery in front of the village of Saint-Martin de Varaville, directly off Causeway Exit 3. It was believed that this coastal battery could jeopardize the landings if operational, and Chapuis' men had to eliminate it in order to ensure successful landings on the beachhead. During all of this, 3rd Battalion of the 502nd, led by Lieutenant Colonel Robert G. Cole, would secure Causeway Exits 3 and 4 and link up with elements of the 4th Infantry when the landings commenced. The 3rd Battalion would also be kept in regimental reserve in case they were needed to support the other 2 battalions in their tasks. At 0:48 hours on June 6, 1944, the first wave of C-47 troop transport planes carrying the 2nd Battalion of the 502nd arrived over the drop zone. It was the first wave of a ceaseless airdrop that would continue in battalion intervals for the next 3 hours. Heavy flak and anti-aircraft fire peppered the skies, forcing many of the planes off course against the low-flying clouds, and leading to many paratroopers being misdropped, sometimes miles away from their designated DZs. All through the night, the paratroopers of the 101st and 82nd, many scattered across the Normandy countryside and nowhere near their intended positions, would form into ad hoc units and wreak havoc on German cohesion and communications. By dawn, many objectives for the Airborne had still yet to be achieved, but with the landing starting at 0630 hours, there was little choice but to press on and accomplish whatever tasks they could. By early morning, Colonel Cassidy had set up his battalion command post in a detached house on the road leading towards the WXYZ Complex. With no word on the capture of Foucaultville, Cassidy shifted his attention towards his primary objective at WXYZ. To accomplish this mission, Cassidy looked to the capable Staff Sergeant Harrison C. Summers of B Company and placed him in command of a 15-man patrol made up of men from various units. The paratroopers now placed under Summers' command were unfamiliar with their new NCO. Summers himself didn't know a single man he would be leading into action or what their fighting capabilities were. As the column of paratroopers moved towards the complex, his men felt uneasy. There was little cover around them except for the lines of hedgerows along the road. At 0900 hours, Summers reached the first house and turned to his men, giving them hand signals to direct the attack. However, the troopers were unsure of Summers' leadership, and a few even kept away from the house. German fire suddenly erupted from the sides of the first house, and Summers' men hit the dirt, taking cover behind low ditches on the roadside. Deciding to lead by example, Summers crawled forward through the adjacent hedgerow, got up and slung his Thompson submachine gun across his shoulder before kicking down the house door. 4 of the stunned Germans were mowed down where they stood. Survivors from the building fled across the road. The first house was now clear. Summers came back through the hedge and signaled to his men, but they refused to advance any further. The frustrated Sergeant Summers carried on with his mission, moving diagonally across the road towards the second house. Here he was joined by Private William A. Burt, armed with a light machine gun. The 2 paratroopers cleared the second house with little difficulty and moved on to attack the third structure. By now, the Germans were responding with machine pistol fire at the two men attacking the compound. Private Burt trained his machine gun on the Germans and cut them down as they moved from cover around the buildings. Summers moved on to the third house and smashed open the door. Inside, 6 Germans were mowed down by a single sweep of Summers' Tommy gun. While Summers moved on to the next house, a captain from the 82nd who had arrived on the scene joined him in the assault. However, before the captain managed to move 20 yards, he was shot through the head by a sniper. Summers never even had the chance to get the officer's name. Over the next half hour, Summers and Burt moved house to house, clearing 5 more buildings of the WXYZ complex. Another man from Summers' patrol now summed up the courage to aid them, Private John Kamen, armed with a carbine. While Burt provided machine gun support, the other 2 switched from house to house, Kamen covering Summers with his carbine, while Summers rushed the doors with his Thompson. The 2 took no prisoners in the close quarters fighting. When Summers kicked open the door of the large 6th building, he found a squad of 15 Germans sitting around the dining table, eating breakfast. Firing from the hip, Summers sprayed them with .44 caliber bullets before they had the chance to get out of their seats. 30 Germans had been killed in these 5 buildings. The 3 men next gathered to assault the final structure, a large double-storied barracks house with thick stone walls. By now, more paratroopers were joining in the attack, their morale raised by the sight of 3 men clearing 5 buildings. After moving through a hedgerow, the group found themselves facing a 75-yard open orchard between their position and the structure. When they moved up to prepare their assault, a German sniper opened fire on them from somewhere to their right. 4 of Summers' men were killed by the sniper fire, another 4 wounded. As the group moved closer to the barracks house against the sniper fire, Burt fired tracer rounds from his machine gun into a nearby haystack, lighting it ablaze. The fire soon engulfed the building's adjacent shed, which was being used as an ammunition store. Munitions began exploding, and with that, the Germans inside the farmhouse rushed outside to escape getting caught in the blasts. About 30 of them were gunned down by Summers and his men as they attempted a mad dash across the orchard. With the capture of the final farmhouse, the WXYZ complex was secure. Around 80 Germans had been killed at the cost of about 10 Americans killed or wounded. It was around 1200 hours when Staff Sergeant Summers sat down on the side of the road and lit a cigarette. Summers' patrol, but for the most part just Summers and Burt, had single-handedly wiped out an entire company-sized garrison of German troops. D-Day was far from over, but one of the 502nd's key objectives for Mission Albany had now been carried out successfully. Cassidy would soon be able to shift his attention toward the town of Foucarville to the north. For his actions in clearing out the WXYZ complex, Harrison Summers would be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the U.S. Army's second highest decoration for valor. Play War Thunder on PC, PlayStation or Xbox using my link below. When registering on PC, there is a large free bonus pack for using my link, including multiple premium vehicles, premium account, boosters, and much more. If you stayed around this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm. You can also support us on Patreon and get ad-free early access to our videos for as little as $1, or by clicking the thanks button below to leave a one-time tip. As always, we'll see you in the next one.